afternoon, everyone. My name is Carlyn Cowen. I'm from the Chinese American Planning Council. We are the nation's largest Asian American social services agency, and we serve Asian Americans, immigrants from 25 different countries, and low-income New Yorkers in all 5 boroughs. Everything from early childhood education to English as a second language classes, to workforce development, to legal services, LGBTQ services, services for older adults, and everything in between. And we are one of the nonprofit human services providers that Ron has just been talking about. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what this looks like for a social services agency like mine. But before I dive into that, since we are talking about living wages and the wage gap on this panel, I wanted to start off by mentioning that this coming Thursday, the 22nd, is Asian American Pacific Islander Women's Wage Gap Day. And this is important because Asian American Pacific Islander women, cisgender women, non-binary or transgender women, earn 76 cents to the dollar that a white man earns. But when you begin to actually disaggregate this data, it looks even worse than that, especially for Southeast Asian women and Pacific Islander women, some of which earn 38 cents on that dollar. And this is the exact workforce that we employ at the Chinese American Planning Council and the population to a large extent that we serve. And we have 3,000 employees, most of which are Asian American women, and so they are very much the people that we're talking about when we talk about why the wage gap matters for AAPI women. To tell you a little bit more about what this looks like at our organization, we recently did a survey to try to understand what are some of the issue areas that impact our clients and our staff the most, and so we asked 2 questions. The first one was, what is the biggest issue your clients face? And the answer that came back on that was income and living wage, which is no surprise to us really, given that we serve mostly low-income New Yorkers, and we know that Asian Americans, about 48% of Asian Americans in New York make less than the amount of money necessary to make ends meet in New York City. And then we also asked, what is the biggest issue that you face as a staff member of our organization? And the biggest answer that came back was income and living wage. So it means that our staff is experiencing the exact same issues as our clients are experiencing. And we had a lot of staff members in the comments on this say, well, we work really hard every day, we care about our clients, we care about the work that we do so much, and we feel like we should be recognized for it and compensated fairly. And honestly, as a service provider, it's kind of heartbreaking to say, we know that the work you do is important, and we can't compensate you with a good living wage that respects the work that you do and treats with dignity accordingly. And when you begin to look a little more into why we can't pay that living wage, it looks something like this. So we have about $6 million in state contracts as an organization from a variety of different state agencies. The state minimum wage became $13 an hour on December 31st of 2017, which meant that we had to increase our wages for our state contracted workers on January 1st, 2018. And because our state contracts didn't cover the minimum wage, we had to find the money for that elsewhere. And for us, in our organization, that was $100,000 that we had to pull out of nowhere over one day, essentially, to cover it for the year. And that's only going to increase as the minimum wage keeps increasing. Now, don't get me wrong, it's incredibly important for the minimum wage to continue increasing. In fact, we need to go well above and beyond the $15 an hour in order to really create a truly living wage for people. But nonprofit organizations are being forced to pay for it, and it's not covered in their contracts, and it's incredibly difficult to make that money appear. It gets even more complicated than that, though, because then our state contracts went up to $13.50, and that was funded through the city. It was just the state contracts that it wasn't funded on. But then we have people working in the same site, doing the same job, and some of them are earning $13 an hour for it, and some of them are earning $13.50 an hour for it. And as an employer, we say, well, that's obviously not fair. It's bad for the morale for the staff, and it's just simply not equitable. But then if we're going to put that money in, it's another $75,000 that year. Again, for a nonprofit social services organization, it may not sound like a lot, but it's a lot. And then we had some workers that received the increases for the direct care that Aline was talking about earlier, a 3.25% increase on their wages, and so that was for a certain number of workers on their contract lines, and that increase was long overdue and much needed, but there was not an increase that went for the rest of the workers. And so again, we had people in the same program, in the same building, working together, eating lunch together every day, and one of them had an increase of 3.25% in their paycheck and the others didn't. And so we looked at it and we said, what would it cost to do this for everybody to be equitable? And it was $500,000 a year. So you're looking at over $600,000 just in 2018 to cover what the state isn't covering and should be in their contracts. And as a nonprofit organization, it just wasn't feasible for us to do it. And so we have to basically make the choice of how do we deal with this? And so that's obviously why we're part of the Strong Nonprofits campaign, and we're pushing for the state to fund these in this year's budget. But it's not just the clients that it impacts. It's not just the staff that it impacts, it's also our clients, because it means that we can't keep staff. It means that there's high turnover in our staff, and then that means that clients don't have the relationships that they require to have the services they need. So you have somebody that is seeing a counselor for resources or referrals or benefits, and they can't see the same person and they have to explain their case every time. You have someone in language classes that is relying on those classes to then secure a job to increase their income, and you have turnover of teachers, and it's just incredibly difficult. So I'll stop here at this point and turn it over to the next person.